EPAWA Weather Consulting, headquartered in Worth Whitehall, Pennsylvania. This is Weather Weeklies, an informative video of the ins and outs of weather that affect you most in the EPAWA coverage area. The thoughts and opinions expressed in this video are those of the forecaster alone and may not reflect those of the staff of EPAWA Weather Consulting LLC as a whole, nor its constituents. Now, without further ado, here is meteorologist Bobby Martrich with Weather Weeklies.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Weather Weeklies for Sunday, December 1st, start of the new calendar month and also the start of meteorological winter for those that celebrate. I do not count this as a start of winter, typically because our seasons don't coincide with the meteorological seasons around here. The official start of winter is about 3 weeks away, so we have the unofficial start of the winter season today. This is when we start seeing things on the models that are showing snow that will have a little bit more credibility to them as opposed to looking at them, say, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, you know, when they're showing something like that, because now you're into a better pattern where you can, even with marginally cold temperatures, you can still get some snow out of this. And we can see that we did have some start off here. This has not changed since the previous week. We're still looking at the same accumulated amounts of snow so far. Of course, the interior far northern interior areas did quite well with that system that we had a couple weeks ago, but since then we haven't had anything. And this is where you should be year to date in the right column. It's not a lot yet. Most places are an inch or less for what is considered normal, but of course they don't have anything yet in those areas. It's just up here in the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area, which, by the way, is reported by the TV station up there, WNEP. It's in their backyard in Moosic, Pennsylvania. That's where they actually take that reading and use it as the official climate site observation for snowfall there. Okay, so here's what average December and January snow. We're not updating this chart now because we're no longer in November. So this shows obviously a notable increase from November, December in what averages over the 30-year climate average, and those totals nearly double as we get into January. We do have in our projections for the month of December maintained slightly above average snowfall for the region, and in January we have solidly above average snowfall for the region. Okay, and there's reasons for that, but we'll get into that in a little bit. I want to start off with the ENSO regions, and this is their measure of La Nina, El Nino, ENSO neutral, whatever case we may be. I'm not going to make a big case about the ENSO neutral today like I've been doing much in November, but we are still solidly in an ENSO neutral right now. We're not in a La Nina, and although these numbers here that came out on Monday were on either side of 0, which is dead neutral, right? Except the Peruvian coast here, which is much warmer. But that was a temporary thing, because since then, since it's done every Monday, the temperatures have come back down, and in these areas here are now all in a negative ENSO neutral, which is on the negative side of 0. Okay, so we're not in, the threshold for a La Nina, for a weak La Nina to be reached is negative 0.5 degrees Celsius. We're not there yet. A lot of these are between 0.1 and 0.4 below that 0 degree threshold. So we are still in an ENSO neutral right now, and we're still going to do this forecast as if La Nina is not going to be reached. I know a lot of people did their winter outlooks on the La Nina being reached. I don't see that happening on a large scale, and if it does, it's going to be by the skin of its teeth. It's going to be barely so, negative 0.5 maybe you might get to, but it's not going to be much more than that. Here is the sea surface temperature change over the last 2 weeks. And you can see in these El Nino regions here, you can see some cooling, some blue showing up in here. This is the change over the previous 15 days. So it did come down a little bit in temperature since they released this, which is this past Monday. Okay, so these numbers are going to come down. You can see a lot more blues on here next week, but still not to La Nina levels. And then the anomaly overall is looking at this is very slightly below that 0 degree Celsius, which is dead near average. So it's leaning on the cooler side, but it's not quite to negative 0.5 yet. And that's why we're still in an ENSO neutral, okay? Here's what the model projections have from November. I showed this again last week. They're very teetering on that. Here's that negative 0.5 threshold, which is right here. This is what starts a weak La Nina right here at this point once it gets below that. And we are kind of teetering right along that line there. So the statistical averages are keeping it in its ENSO neutral. Dynamical averages are, in fact, taking it to a weak La Nina. It's going to be awfully close, but the background state is still favoring and it's not really favoring La Nina forcing right now, and we haven't seen evidence of that So it's still behaving like an ENSO neutral does. And what that does is means that there's going to be a lot of variability. This is the overall paintbrush pattern of an ENSO neutral winter pattern, which is different from a La Nina, which has a southeast ridge down here that pumps up. You get this ridging over here at times during a La Nina because you have a negative. Your ridge out west is kind of flat, right? So you get a lot of cold in the western United States, warm in the east. You're going to see at times this winter where you're going to have some breaks in the pattern, and you're going to see some influence of negative ridging out here, negative PNA out here in the west. You're going to see that, and we're going to see actually this month, in fact, we're on mid-month, and I'll get to that in a second. But the overall pattern here looks very similar to what you would expect in a negative EPO pattern. This is very similar. Here's the negative EPO. This is what's driving the cold for the first 10 plus days of this month, okay? So it's very cold relative to average right now. It's below average solidly, and that's because we have a cross-polar flow coming across the Arctic here and coming right down and spilling into the eastern and central part of the United States is why we're getting these colder temperatures. And that was as a result of ridging coming into the Gulf of Alaska. Now that is going to be, it's a little bit too far east right now. So this is not being over here. I'll show you that in a second too. So we're not going to get some big storms just yet to coincide with this cold air. We have the pattern during the first week of December is going to be a lot of northern stream influence, and I'll show you that here in a minute too. But this is very familiar here. This kind of pattern here is typical of an ENSO neutral pattern where the EPO can dominate as long as the EPO is negative or leaning negative, and that's what it's been doing here over the past couple weeks, or the past week or so. Here is the or since Thanksgiving, I should say. Since Thanksgiving is really when it changed a little bit from that EPO influence. If it's a positive EPO, you get a flood of milder air into the country. I don't see it going positive, and if it does it for a very, very short time. Here is what we have for the EPO projections. You see it's right now it's negative, but it kind of hangs on either side of negative. Maybe down out here when you get toward the middle of the month, it does very briefly. But it's really, it may be going from negative to neutral, and that's it. But one thing that will change, and this is very typical of a La Nina pattern, is the ridge out. This is the Pacific North American pattern, which is the ridge out in the western United States. So in a La Nina, you typically favor a negative PNA, which is down here, right? So around mid-month, which is what this is. It does slip negative, but I think that's temporary too, and it goes back to positive after that. So a positive ridging out west gives you the opportunity for cold in the east, and it's kind of the opposite if it's negative. Okay, so it'll be western U.S. cold and milder temperatures in the east, but this is going to be a temporary thing, I think, around in and around mid-month, in that third week of December is when we're looking at for the negative PNA, which will then recover, I think, after that point. So a lot of Greek there, but let's talk about the overall pattern. I think is going to become very dominant this winter. It's a positive TNH, that is a tropical northern hemisphere, and negative EPO, which is your ridging in the Gulf of Alaska. Okay, so this combination, now this is too far east. This is actually a neutral EPO here. If it's dominating in the Gulf of Alaska, that is a negative EPO. Then the other feature here, and then you can put a big H right there, right? Because that's high pressure and ridging. And then you have a dominant low pressure or tropospheric polar vortex sitting over Hudson Bay. Okay, that is the positive PNA, which is the ridging here, negative EPO, and plus TNH combo. Okay, this combo is going to be very familiar in this upcoming winter. I think this is showing a lot of signs and similarities to the 2013-2014 winter. And before you get excited about that one, because there was a lot of snow in that, it's all going to depend on where this ridging takes place. This is too far east, and that's why you're seeing so many progressive systems this week, and all northern stream dominance, no connection to the southern jet, and are staying separate. If this is all further west, everything is further west here by a little bit. So instead of this being here, it's over the Gulf of Alaska. That pushes this trough further west, and then you can get some kind of some bigger storm potential. But right now we're not going to have that because it's too far east, and that combo mid-month is going to flip to this. Okay, so this is a flatter ridge out here, obviously negative PNA, and you see the colder anomalies are out here in the western United States, and leaning milder, not mild, but leaning milder. Maybe a couple days that it gets near average or near to very slightly above for a little bit before it goes back down again is what we're thinking. Matt and Julian oscillation are going two different directions, whether you're looking at the GFS ensemble or the European ensemble. This all has to do with amplitude. The amplitude, this is a low amplitude signal here, low frequency signal that is on the European ensemble. On the GFS ensemble, it is a lot more amplified. Okay, kind of leaning most. It looks like most of the American guidance, the GFS ensembles and the CFS, are following this higher amplitude pattern, where the foreign models, including the Australian model and some others, are showing this lower amplitude forcing. We have seen low amplitude forcing in the maritime continent right now and the Indo-Pacific regions, and that is in large part, if I go back to this map here, which is the anomaly, large part due to this worm pool that's sitting out here. This worm pool is actually dictating that, okay? So that will promote a pattern where you have that low sitting over over Hudson Bay and ridging into the Gulf of Alaska. If it's positioned right, you can get bigger storms. Right now it's not positioned right, so you're getting the weaker storms, but you're still getting a dominance of this overall pattern going into this winter. So I would expect that going forward into January, we're going to see, the rest of this month in January, we're going to see these transient, just like I've been talking about the last couple of weeks, transient up and downs as far as temperatures are concerned, but you're going to have breaks in the action too. So you're going to have some colder periods that might last 7 to 10 days, right? And the EPO's dominating and whatever else, we get this cold spilling in here. And then you have a moderation period for a couple of days, and then it goes back to cold again. It goes a back and forth pattern. You're not going to be locked in. And this is typical of an ENSO neutral pattern where it's a lot of variability. You do this nonsense a lot. So I've been saying that in the last couple of Weather Weeklies videos, that you're whatever pattern you're not going to be locked in these for a very long time, and you're going to have breaks in the pattern as it reloads, and that's what it's going to end up doing, I think. So it just comes down to, on the Mount-Julian Oscillation, how amplified this pattern is out here, the forcing out here in that same region. Right now, we haven't seen anything that was any strong forcing in that region at all. So while it doesn't speak to the entirety of this winter as a whole, you're going to have colder than average temperatures that linger for a little bit with those transient ups and downs in between. So this is the first week of December, first week to 10 days. You're going to have a lot of northern stream dominance, okay? Where the northern jet here in blue is separated, remains separate from the southern jet, which is in red. So you'd have no connection to the Gulf of Mexico here that can get you any amplification, any big storms. So you'll have these little lows moving across the northern stream here, clipper systems. And we'll have a few of those this week, and you see that here on this morning's GFS. You got one coming in here on Wednesday. Looks kind of rather weak now. Just a few snow showers with that, mainly Wednesday night. And then you have another one coming in over the weekend. This is Friday night and Saturday, right? Another one. And there's a third one that comes in here. It's showing after that here on around the 8th or so. So there's a couple of successive systems coming like every 2 or 3 days that are clipper systems that give you some light snow events, but these are not big storms. There's no connection to the Gulf moisture, and therefore they're moisture starved, and you just get a few snow showers that just make things look festive and pretty, and that's it. That's all you're going to have, and the reason for that is because, again, this trough axis is too far displaced to the east. You need this a little bit further west than it is here, and a lot of that is because of this ridge is too far east. It's a neutral EPO here at this point at the end of the first week of December. Okay, so that is why we're just getting all northern stream systems coming up and over the top here, and they're very weak. They're kind of coming in or diving our area like this, and they're just weak systems that don't produce a lot of snow. You might get some snow showers, and might even be pretty far south, but that's what you get. And the temperatures, looking at the temperatures the next couple of weeks, it is going to moderate once you get to mid-month. We got a couple cold surges, the current one and another one behind our clipper on Wednesday. Another little slightly below average period here, but you get the mid-month. Look, it's getting closer to average there. Okay, there's one of those relaxation periods that I'm talking about, where it's not going to be a constant barrage here. You get these in between milder ahead of a cold front, turns for a couple days. So it's not going to be constant. Looking at this in graphical form, you can see this a little bit better. This is solidly below average in this entire period, going all the way up through about the 12th of December. 48 is the average high in Allentown, Lehigh Valley International Airport today, and it drops to 43 for an average high on December 17th. And you can see this entire period is below average until you get out here toward that warmer period. It's just getting us back to near average, maybe near to slightly above average for a couple days in there, but then we go back down to below average after that, it looks like, or at least slightly below. And we can see that here on the GFS ensemble. You get back to near average, and then around mid-month, and it goes back to slightly below average to end the month, at least leaning on the cooler side of average, and then we get into January, it's starting to get a little bit cooler yet. That's the GFS extended ensemble showing that. That's the near average temperature around mid-month, or during that third week of December, and then it goes back to at least slightly below average after that point. The European extended, which is the European weekly, is doing the same thing. It moderates around mid-month, and then it goes right back down to slightly below average and stays there straight into January. This actually goes all the way through January 15th, and it's still not showing above average anomalies overall for that week. Now, this is using a 7-day average. Can there be spikes within those weeks? Yes, of course. You can have some milder periods mixed in there, but the dominant overall pattern is looking cooler than average. And when you have that, you have the opportunity for snowfall, obviously. Here is the European ensemble for the entirety of the month of December. These numbers here, if they came to fruition across this region, will be slightly above average for everywhere across our region. And it does show snow in some cases pretty far south too. So this isn't specific to any single event, or this is obviously a combination of all events that occur during the month of December, and this averages 50 individual members and comes up with this mean, and these mean numbers here are slightly above average snowfall. So we're going to keep that projection for the month of December. We did introduce January as an above average month. I think you're going to have more precipitation to work with to coincide with temperatures at that point don't have to be colder than average to produce snow, because it's the coldest climatological period of the year across the region. So they're already pretty cold to begin with. But if you're going to add in the fact that you're slightly below average temperatures in January also with above average precipitation, it doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. So we have above average snowfall here in the month of January as a result of that. We do have a winter storm signal listed between the 10th and 12th in our long-range outlook. This is last night's GFS showing that storm. This is that storm. What it does is still in question. The morning run of the GFS, this was last night overnight, showed something a little bit different. It slid a little bit too far to the east. It was more progressive. Every single run, these change back to back, but there is a signal there. There's the storm. It's not like it's not there. It's just a matter of what it does. Is it something that maybe gives you snow on the front end, the rain? Is it something that gives you rain and snow? Is this just suggesting, or is it too progressive and too far east? Those are questions we'll have to follow here over the next couple of days, but we certainly have time to look at that. We're looking at the 10th to 12th time frame as this pattern starts to relax a little bit, that you can get a storm here, and that's why we have that storm signal listed. This is just a period to watch. That's all this is. It's not a guarantee for snow or accumulating snow at any single given location within our region. So this is still there. That is our storm signal. The models now have it. They didn't the other day when I did the long-range outlook on Friday. Now they have it. At least the some ensembles were hinting at it, but there it is. Okay, that's the system we're going to be watching. And again, it's not a guarantee that it's going to happen, but we're just going to continue to follow that. There is a storm there, and there is a signal. So we have below average temperatures that continue for the first 10 plus days of December, with some moderation occurring mid-month, but I do think after that you're still favoring slightly below average temperatures. Weak northern stream systems at several points during the first 7 to 10 days of December, and then we're going to watch that winter storm signal period between the 10th and the 12th as that period relaxes. The longer term pattern still leans colder than average overall, with transient milder periods in between. Okay, still going to be in this dominance. I think this pattern here, I think that we have, is that with this combo of a ridge out west, the negative EPO, which is your ridging in the Gulf of Alaska, and a TNH, which is your low pressure over Hudson Bay, and that dominance of pattern is going to be very commonplace, I think, this winter, at least the early part of winter, with those transient breaks in between. It's not going to be constant. So when I brought up 2013, 2014, that was a constant. That was constantly. I mean, it was pretty brutal. Once you got to January, it was January, February brutal, and even part of March were absolutely brutal. Okay, as far as temperatures, I'm not suggesting that. I think you're going to have more variability this year. It's not going to be just like that year, where you're not just dominating for months on end with cold. You will have an overall dominance of cold, but you're going to have these transient breaks in between, okay? And that's going to be like a struggle back and forth between, hey, does it want to be a La Nina pattern, or does it want to be an ISO neutral? And that back and forth is going to lead to some variability, which is typically found in an ISO neutral anyway, okay? So it's going to show signs that it wants to be a La Nina every once in a while and look like that, but they should be transient and go back to more ridging. You see, this is the 15th, and it's backwards here. We have the higher heights here, lower heights here, but look what's starting to build into the Gulf of Alaska up here. Again, we got the EPO starting to kick in and starting to build at this point. So that means that after this, it's going to be a transient thing. It's going to everything's going to keep moving along, and it's going to reverse itself, and will be a little cooler than average here. It looks like after we get past the third week of December and head toward the end of the month, we will be colder again. So you're going to hear a lot of things about this warmer pattern, milder mid-month. It's relative to now, okay? This is, again, well below average right now, all right? Yeah, it's going to moderate, but it's moderating back to near average or near to slightly above. It's not very warm, per se. We're not getting 70s on Christmas, in other words. So this is not what we're dealing with. Then after this point, we should start going back down again once we get further into the third week of December. So that's this edition of Weather Weeklies for Sunday, December 1st. We're going to go continue follow all these little storm signals that we got here. Less speculation, more actual going forward here. But right now we're just kind of being patient, letting this develop. It's still early December. It's still not winter yet, technically. But we will have these systems to follow one after another. It looks like this week that's going to be these little clipper systems. Can any of these do anything is the question. Don't know. Wednesday's looking less, just a few snow showers and that's it. We'll see what the other two behind it do, but we can get some snow showers at least from the northern stream, albeit light, for this first full week to 10 days of December. I will see you again next week. Take care.